Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Christian and this is another Lofty Notion. So those of you who follow me on Instagram know that I have been posting videos about my lathe bed, and with the lathe bed trying to get it flat on both the top and the bottom so that the mounting bases sit properly and it sits nice and level, and then the top is as close to level as I could possibly get it. This weekend I am planning on hand scraping the top of the lathe bed. The reason for that is to get it even closer to flat. When I posted on Instagram, my lathe bed in the middle dipped down less than a 32nd, and so I figured that was close enough to work with the sander, and I am moving on to just plain hand scraping now, following the resources in chapter 1 of the second book covering the gingery lathe. He goes through the operation of how to actually flatten the lathe bed. So if I flip my camera around, alright, I guess my camera does not want to just flip it around unless that's what the other button is for. In any case, here is my setup currently. Let me just walk you through a few things. This right here is the lathe bed that I've been working on for the last week. Well, I guess it's probably been about 10 days now since I actually got that thing cast, and then working with a sander and sanding down the top. Once the top was mostly flat, I then used a ruler to measure the height of it and tried to get the bottom completely flat and level with that. Right here is my grade A. I think it's an 8 by 12, maybe it's a 9 by 12. Anyway, it's a surface plate that I purchased through Woodcraft. They had a sale a few months ago, and it was on sale enough that when I bought it on sale, because the store in the nearest town to us didn't have any more, the cost of shipping was the same as how much I got off. So I actually bought it for basically its full price, but had it shipped straight to my house. Back over here you can see there is a tube of Prussian blue that I've been using to rub on it, and then I've got one of those rubber rollers to help rub it. Just some cut up t-shirt there that I use to brush off any dust. As you can see, I've got it sitting over my wonderful sand holder. Probably shouldn't be doing that here, but my woodworking bench is an absolute disaster right now, and I don't have a good spot for the surface plate to go while I have the lathe bed clamped down in the vise. So rather than moving a bunch of stuff around, I opted to walk across my entire garage to go back and forth between this station and my woodworking station. Behind that, you can actually see that I have I bought this sharpening plate back when I was first getting into sharpening, and I didn't realize that this was going to be entirely too small for sharpening things like my Japanese plane blades, and then I ended up buying a set of 3 from Amazon. Had them shipped. They're quite a bit wider. I believe they're the 3-inch wide ones, and then I have an old file. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm doing the hand scraping thing. Essentially I have the Prussian blue already rubbed on there. I've done some scraping initially already, but I can take my lathe bed, set it down on my surface plate, rub it across it a few times, and you can see it'll show the high spots that the paint is able to touch based on this surface plate. Now when it's a grade A surface plate, that means it's fairly flat all the way across. It's flatter than what I care to try and measure. You actually need one of those fancy measuring devices, and there are guys that know how to lap these things completely flat. And but for my intents and purposes, that's all the more I need. So I have all these blue spots, and those are all the high spots on this lathe. And then what I do is I end up clamping it down into my vise over at the workbench, and I take just the tip of the file and I scrape back and forth at 90-degree angles. And I don't know if the reflection will show very well in the video, but I've got several hash marks across this thing from the times where I've gone a few passes already, and I will just continue to knock these down until the idea is to have a thing that is about a square inch and to have so many of these smaller dots like this in here to where you can count each of those individual dots, and you want to have so many of those within a square inch to call it flat. Now, the reason they call it flat, especially on a bed, or more importantly on a ways, which is the piece of steel I'll be putting on top of here that lets the tools travel back and forth. The idea is that when you have two completely smooth metal surfaces, there's a term for it where the metals basically bond. You can look up YouTube videos where they'll take two pieces of machined aluminum, and when you slide them up against each other, the friction causes them to basically stick together, and you won't see a seam or anything around the piece. And you don't want that when you have tools that are trying to travel up and down. So what this does, by making these hash marks and having little gaps in between the dots, when you put oil down, the oil will sit in those gaps and the tools will float on that oil while still being on a flat surface. So you'll get a nice straight cut. Very important when you're working with machinery to have things be flat and straight, so that you're not getting weird shapes and weird angles when you don't expect it. So anyway, I am working on that. As you can see, my file does not have a handle. I have not gone down to the store to buy one. So when I'm gripping this thing and trying to scrape each of these spots, my hand gets really tired. So I have to take breaks pretty frequently, and in between those breaks, what I am looking to do is to cast this piece. Now, some of you have asked, what in the world is this thing even? And if I put this is my mounting bracket, and they sit in the corners, and this is where this thing gets bolted to the bench. And that way, once it's bolted to a bench, it can't rock and shake and stuff, because you're going to be scraping metal, and metal likes to vibrate, and the less vibrations, the better. So this mounting bracket and another one that goes over onto this side over here get bolted up through these, and there's a couple of holes in here that you bolt up into the bed, and then it also bolts to the piece of steel using a piece of threaded rod and some lock nuts, maybe some washers and other things. But in any case, these are the things I am working on today. The big focus being on scraping that thing, and then in between breaks of scraping that thing, going ahead and trying to mold my sand for the mounting bracket. Now, something I learned literally within the last couple days, my sand has been too wet. I have this nice big pump spray can that used to be for my bearded dragon so that he could get a nice water bath once in a while. I would fill this thing up twice, and I would fill it up past the 60 ounce, which is probably somewhere around the range of 2 liters of water. I would fill this thing up twice to get my sand wet. And after watching some of the sand mulling videos on YouTube, these guys are doing the amount of sand that I have with a quarter of the water that I'm using. So I let my sand dry overnight. It finally has a pretty decent consistency to it. The top level dries out pretty quick, but as soon as you get down into the bottom level, my sand compacts quite a bit better. Now again, I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to get sand all over my nice surface plate. I'm just going to have to brush it off and clean it off again. But yeah, those are my plans for this weekend. I figure that doing that should be something worthwhile to get done this weekend, getting those mounting brackets cast, and then starting to work on the threaded rod. I have the rod already, and back on my bench, which is back over in this direction here, I have a set of taps and dies that I can use to make the rod threaded and then start to get that stuff done. So slowly but surely working away on my lathe. I'll bring you guys in here and there as I'm working on various things. Probably not a lot of the scraping video. It is extremely boring, extremely tedious, and just makes for a lot of pain and soreness while working on it. But then otherwise, I will bring you guys around when I am working on casting my mounting brackets for that lathe bed. All right, back again. I did some scraping. I decided right after I recorded the last video to go ahead and actually move my stuff over there. So I have my surface plate that's right here. There's the lathe bed in my vise, and I've got everything else that I need over there. And I did that so that we could, sorry, I'm going to flip the camera around again. I did that so that I could get another pattern molded up. So I tried it once before and had the bottom fall out, the bottom half of the top half of the coat fall out. And so I went ahead and redid it. This time the top went well. My sand had dried just enough between when I was looking at using it and when I actually got around to using it, and so it didn't want to stick to the bottom. So instead I wet it just a little bit. I only did maybe 250 milliliters, maybe that much, just to get it wet enough so that it had a good firm texture. Oh, yeah, no, the top just fell out. Well, that's not good. In any case, I guess that one gets chalked up to the, we're going to try it again in a little while. Whew. It's a lot of work trying to get this stuff to mold properly. I finally am using baby powder instead of diatomaceous earth in order to try and get the stuff to separate better. It does separate better, but with this large flask, I don't have a bead on the inside of this larger flask like the directions say I'm supposed to. And as you can see, this is what happens when you don't. It crumbles apart real easy and it just makes a gigantic mess. So I guess I'm going to mash up this sand. Like I say, it's holding a nice firm texture there. I finally have enough of a process with these things that I can actually get it to stay most of the time. So I guess I'm just going to work on this yet again. So anyway, I won't bore you guys with the ramming up of a flask. I may grab some 1/4 inch square and staple it like I did with this guy. I have my beads in there with some staples so that it holds it in place. I'll probably do the same thing with the coat of this 12 by 12 flask and then try ramming this thing up again and get it going again. So I'll bring you guys back in when I get to that. Well, I'm back again. Another day has passed. It's actually no longer Saturday. It's now Sunday night. A lot of things going on, but I was finally able to get enough time to get a proper packing of the sand. I didn't bring you guys in on that because I honestly didn't think it was going to work after the last few failures that I had, but this time I guess I want to say my lesson learned is that I do need a top and bottom board when I go to flip the coat, or rather the whole flask. You can hear in the background I got my furnace fired up. I've got a little bit of aluminum in there, and I just finished hacking in half one of the motorcycle parts that I was given. So once the bit that I've got in there has melted down, I'm going to throw those things in and get that all melted down. I did do a couple more passes on the lathe bed, which is sitting you know, on the other side of the camera from me right now. I haven't got it quite flat. Sometimes I wonder if I'm even doing the right thing, but it's slowly coming along. If I go ahead and stop the video and flip it around, there we can see I've got my furnace running. I've got my flask set up and ready to go. So basically I'm just waiting for the aluminum to melt at this point, and then I will commence with pouring. So I'm going to go ahead and I guess I'll just let the video run while I wait for this stuff to melt down. You guys will see me walking in front of it and all kinds of stuff, checking on it, things like that, as I get ready to pour the entire thing. So here we go. Let it time lapse. I just put in one piece of the busted part. Well, not busted, I sawed it in half with a hacksaw. So one piece went in there. That's all that'll fit in my crucible at one time, just because of how wide these pieces are. I'll wait for that piece to melt down. There was already a nice puddle from the previous stuff. I guess it had gotten hot enough and finally cooled. So that piece is going in, and I'll put the second piece in, and then we'll be back and ready to pour. So the last piece that I dropped in there was the screw to the previous mounting bracket that I cast. And I just want to make sure that it's not sitting there floating as a pile of molten metal. Alright, I'm not sure if that's usable aluminum or not. I cast it with that stuff on there last time. Seems to be alright. It seems like it's just film that puddles up on the top because it's slightly cooler than the molten underneath. I'm going to kick that on for just a little bit longer. Make sure that it's nice and liquid. Alright, let's get this thing going. That's a big pile of mess. All the rest of that stuff just flopped out of the bottom of my crucible. I guess a lot of that might be slag, so I'll let that cool and pick through it later. But at least we got the cast, or the pour, done for my second mounting bracket. So originally, I cast this other mounting bracket off camera. Let me grab that. So I cast this mounting bracket off camera, and I don't know. I had another hiccup where when I removed the cope, the pattern stayed inside, so I just pushed it back down. I don't think I cleaned it out very well, so when I put the pattern back on top, you can see it left quite a bit of gap from when I pulled the pattern out in those couple of spots. The top seems to be all right. I just need to actually go through and do something in order to get that little shelf that sits on the corner for that. I could clean this thing up, and giving it second thoughts and stuff, I think I might just go ahead and break out the grinder, the angle grinder, and just clean it up and see if it will work before I just decide to trash it. But anyway, I'm going to let that thing cool for about a half an hour, and once that is done, I'll bring it back out here and we'll crack it open and we'll see how it did. All right, it's been about that half hour now, so I'm going to go ahead and aim the camera over at the sandbox and get the thing lifted up, brought over, and let's unpack it. All right. I'll wear my gloves because sand is usually still pretty hot. And I'm just moving it over so I can pour all the sand over on that side. And it's still a disaster in here. There we go. Alright, let's see how it did. Bottom of it doesn't look too bad. Alright. Nice and easy. There we go. Adding in those, what do you want to call them? Spars? I forget what they're called. Anyway, adding those things in really helps out with keeping this thing, keeping the sand in. Same thing with using a board and continuing to use the board. This metal is still really hot. Just knock it out. All right, not too bad. Let me cool it off so I can actually handle it. Alright, well, here it is. I like it quite a bit more than the last one. Little bit of fuzzy there, but that'll grind down, I think. Doesn't look too bad there. Otherwise, it's just, it's got the same texture of the sand on the outside edge, so some of these spots you can see it worked out pretty well. The sides, as I was pulling the pattern out, rubbed up against those sides, so those edges aren't quite as flat and distinct like some of these other spots are. But it even has a nice ridge around the outside edge for where that sits. And I've even got a spot in the bottom, or on the inside, so that I can properly drill through after I've sawn off the sprue and flattened that all down. So I'm going to call this one a success. Pretty good. I think I'm going to go ahead and keep the other one that I put together. I'm not quite sure where I set it. Probably back over there somewhere. So anyway, yeah, looking good. I'm going to call this good to go. And the next time you see me, I'll either be filing down the top of the ways or working to get these guys nice and cleaned up.